Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Indian section, I welcome you all. Before beginning, let's all join together in the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he's also one with every other. So today's speaker once again is Sister Catalina. She is our Colombian Bahu, our Bhabi and Beti, whom we love. And she is a wonderful exponent for Theosophy. She has multiple roles as an editor, writer, speaker, international speaker, and also raising a daughter. So I welcome her to continue Letters of Blavatsky to Sinnet, Appendix-III, the second part. Welcome, sister.
Thank you very much for that lovely and cheerful introduction. That's all true. We are a family here, and I'm very happy to be part of it in India. Thank you very much. And okay, and namaste to everyone, to all the dear friends and sisters and brothers. And I thank Vimalji for her introduction, Brother Pradeep Mahapatra for the invitation, Brother Shikar, the host, and Sister Sushma, and also that are here, is here for the Hindi translation and the entire Indian section. So as I always ask you at the beginning, let's just come together and center ourselves because we are coming from different activities, etc. So let's close our eyes for a couple of seconds, just connecting in the silence, reminding ourselves of our shared thoughts and intentions here now. In spite of physical distance, we are united by heart, by intention, and by the presence of being here together. Let's feel that connection for beginning our work. Thank you very much. So I'm going to share the screen. You can just make me co-host or allow me. Okay, thank you. So as mentioned by Sister Rima, today we are going to go to the second part of the Appendix-III on the chronological edition. And as I mentioned last time, this appendix is composed by 35 fragments or letters. And these letters offer a vivid and personal window into the formative years of the Theosophical movement, and they are also a complement of the Mahatma letters, even if they are different because they are specifically LDS letters from Blavatsky to Sinnet, though not all of them are letters or exchange between Sinnet and Blavatsky. There are also some letters from Hume, Anna Kingsford, and all of them, most of them have whether the underlined by the masters, K, H, and M, or have notes of the masters themselves. So also as mentioned last time, the topics across the Appendix-III are 4 that I could identify, and that are all, of course, topics that are also part of the Mahatma letters themselves, that are the relationship with the Mahatmas and the esoteric path, personal struggles and sacrifice, occult teachings, practical instruction and phenomena, and the defense of the Theosophical Society, and some advice that is given on the administration. So last session, in the first part, we cover the letters that are listed there, 2, 4, 5, 20, 29, 30, and 34, and 50. They are not only, They are not necessarily 2, 3, 4, 5. No, these are the ones that appear in the first part that we cover. And today we will cover two letters. Both of them were written by Hume. So we will cover one on the entire content and the other part of it that we will finish next session. These fragments are very rich and they have a lot of important insights and informations and reminders of what we have already studied in the previous group of letters from the Mahatmas. So the letters that we spoke about last time basically offer some glimpses that show the tension between the spiritual ideals and the leadership, especially when it's about Hume. Also, they talk about how the the contact with the masters depends on inner readiness and not intellectual effort. Also, Sinnet gets some moral and practical guidance from the masters regarding the matters of the Theosophical Society. Some of them, Blavatsky reveals the deep personal strain that she has to face in all these years. And also some highlight is that the spiritual work is shown as something that requires this like curing with the inner person, with the inner side of the person. And that's basically like in general what these letters were talking about. And today we will continue with the LBS 155 from September 1882. This is a letter that was written by Hume to Master K.A. And it is a letter that is full of sharp reflections. I also felt a lot of intellectual tension from Hume. We have seen many opportunities that Hume is kind of struggles between his own Western mindset and how for him, the intellect is something that is still very prevalent. So this is reflected a lot in this letter and the spiritual struggle. And through the letter, we see some comments of the master himself. So the letter reveals A.O. Hume's deeply conflicted yet intensely honest relationship with the masters. Hume, an intellectual of great force and candor, stands at a crossroads between rational skepticism and aspirational idealism, trying to reconcile his Western training mind with the esoteric teachings that are unfolding for him with all this exchange of letters and his study. So to all these correspondence, we see sharp critique of tone and approach from Hume. This is a letter that really, when you read it and you see the way he uses the language and he addresses the master, you can a little have an idea how was the character of this person. And in the first point of that letter, he even criticizes the tone that is used between the masters and H.P.B. and he perceives it as cold or disrespectful. And he begins the letter saying as follows. He says, I not only do not dislike your exercise of this right. He's talking about the right of speaking in his mind. He's addressing to the master that the exercise that the master has to speak his own mind freely. So he says, I not only do not dislike your exercise of this right, but I crave for it, and should be glad indeed if you were always to speak your mind far more freely than you do. So actually, he wants the master to give him more, and as always, he's wanting always to have more information of what It is given by the masters. And he says, I object to rudeness. Some people are rude. To which KH comments the following. He says, does he call his letters to M and HP by HPB polite? So there is an irony because he's criticizing the letters between HPB and the masters like unpolite. But when we read the letters that he himself writes to the master, and the second letter that I'm going to talk today, there is a letter that he writes to HPB. Actually, there is also a tone that is not very polite. So the master actually is criticizing this with a little bit of irony. So basically, Hume craves that the Mahatma speak plainly and often expresses frustration at what he perceives as a cryptic or insufficiently authoritative guidance. He always is craving for more and more guidance from the master. And he says exactly this, I cannot really say as you think, you have too little time, and the only manner in which you appear to have any time, by letter, is so slow and so unsatisfactory that it will not be right for me to look nowhere else. So she clearly is telling, I am not satisfied with the few things that you can give me by letter. That is the only way that you can communicate with me. So I have to look somewhere else for all this information that I am craving. And that also goes with the fact that he expresses deep skepticism toward the teachings of the master, voicing doubts fueled by conflicting interpretation from other highly learned sources. So actually he is looking to other sources somewhere else because he needs more. And he says the following. Circumstances have prevented it, your placing me in such a position that I could feel certain you were correct in what you teach. Very probably you are, but others of the highest learning who have apparently gone over a good deal the same ground as yourself, traverse your views to a great extent. In the first place, they seem to hold you are hats. All are on the wrong road. That you are but refined and highly cultured tantrikists, striving for the upasana of Shakti or Kamarupa instead of that of Pranava or Brahman. They equally disagree as to your view that there is no God. So in this problem, there are so many things. Hume questions the authority of Mahatma Kutumi, of his teachings, by comparing them to the views of other learned individuals who claim that the masters, whom he refers to as arhats, are on the wrong path. He accuses them of following a refined form of tantrikism centered on the upasana, that is the worship of Shakti, or Kamarupa, that is like the embodiment of desire, rather than the contemplation of Pranava, that is the sacred seal of Om that represents the cosmic vibration, or Brahman, the impersonal absolute reality. So basically, he's saying that there are other learned people that, the doubt is put in his mind when he went to these other sources and read that there are other learned people that actually consider that the masters are in the wrong path. And also we should not hear that this refers as God in a sense of an individual or anthropomorphized, but a divine principle. So actually, in his Western mindset, he has still that vision of an anthropomorphized God. But the reference when we are talking about Pranava or Brahman is that God impersonal, absolute reality. So there is a comment of the master that makes us think this echoes the views of Advaita Vedanta. I didn't put here the comment, but immediately after this part, the master puts Advaita Vedanta. So this view that he is contrasting, that Hume is contrasting, is that of the where the only ultimate reality is Brahman, which is formless, changeless, and beyond all duality, where the individual soul, Atma, is identical to Brahman, and the liberation comes to realizing this non-dual truth. So when Hume expresses this shows his constant attitude of not being able to fully accept this theosophical view of an impersonal absolute reality. This, I mean, when the master says that there is no God, what he means is there is no God in such sense of anthropomorphized God. But what is there is like this impersonal absolute reality. But when we read this from Hume, we see that for him it's difficult to accept this, what we could call theosophical rejection of a personal God. And this reveals a deep spiritual and psychological boundary between the Eastern esotericism of the masters and the Western religion traditions that Hume has been used to. So he continues in the letter. But my dear friend, supposing that you are right, you'll see the language that he's using constantly, then I greatly fear that a philosophy crowned by the bold, crude atheism that you insist on in your notes, for you will not have my real enunciation of this, will not be accepted, even in this sadly materialistic age. Europe will not have it, neither will Asia. But moreover, even could we refuse it, will it be productive of good in the present state of the world? To you and men of your purity and elevation of character, even to men low down in the scale like myself, pure atheism may do not harm, but to the untaught and spiritually holy and awakened classes, it will fear bring evil. So this is the critique that Hume is making to this view of the master. And the master immediately has a comment. So now you will see that through all this letter, I will put Hume's words in blue and the comment of the master will come in a violet color so we can make a difference between both of them. And the master comments to this like this. He says, and can a superstitious fiction believe in a pure myth be ever productive or good? Because anthropomorphized idea of God is nothing but a superstitious fiction. It's also a pure myth. So master is really questioning if that, I mean, because Hume says, no, this form of God, immanent and this impersonal absolute reality that you propose as God cannot be understood by the masses, but it's of no purpose. It is of no benefit, but the master says, okay. And is it this superstition that the masses are used to believe in? And he adds, we are called by him Jesuits, and yet his policy will be pure Loyola. So here, basically, he's referring to the way that even the missionaries use this, he wants also to use, the missionaries use like these myths, this superstition to convince people. So in this exchange, Hume cautions that spreading the Mahatma's pure atheism or the rejection of this personal God will harm the unawakened masses, even if it doesn't affect the morally mature. And he fears that without some religious belief, society may fall into confusion or moral decay. And Kutumi firmly disagrees. He rejects the idea that comforting illusions are beneficial. They are really not beneficial. And he compares Hume's views to the tactics used by the Jesuits and other Christian groups that sometimes base all their beliefs in myths as well. So he insists that truth and not myth or superstition or fiction, must be the basis of a spiritual progress. That is what really the master is calling for, to really go deep into the truth, because that is the only way to really get some spiritual progress. Theosophy views believe that this view of personal God is nothing but a temporary stage, is a projection of the human mind. And ultimately, it becomes a barrier to realizing the divine as impersonal, as universal consciousness. True spiritual awakening involves transcending duality and external authority, activating buddhi manas or connecting with buddhi manas, the higher mind that perceives the unity. So this exchange that has this letter challenges not only Hume, but every one of us when we read it as seekers to move beyond theological crutches and align with the society's motto that there is no religion higher than true, not as a cult theory, but as a call to fearless, compassionate inner awakening. So this is a very interesting and motivating exchange that really looks to unveil what is there when we are capable of seeing beyond all the superstitions, beliefs, and myths that have been taught to us through all the years. And the letter continues. In the last paragraph of this letter, Hume goes like this. But the effect of early trainings, as you will say, because actually he keeps insisting to the master that he wants more training, more knowledge, more proof, more and more. And the master warns him that early training is not convenient, that it can be dangerous. So that's the early training he is referring to. He says, but the effect of early training, as you will say, intuition, as I claim, Hume thinks that he is developing his intuition, or that if the master gives him more and more information, occult information, he will be developing his intuition. But we will notice often that he sometimes mistakes intuition by intellectuality. That's why the master says, no, I won't give you more than what I have given you, because that is what it's now appropriate for you. But he insists, so he says, but the effect of early training, as you will say, intuition, as I claim, does not allow me to accept your view as proved. I cannot truly say that I believe that there is no God. I believe rather that there is a God. I do not think you are correct in the view that you take of my changeableness. Because another thing of the letter that I didn't bring here, but is that he says that, yeah, he changes, he's a changeable person, but the reason why he changes is because it's like his inner interest that makes him like interested in different things. So he says that the reason of that changeableness is because I am many-sided, and as I travel on, I revolve, and you see different sides at different times. but you will find that my orbit varying minor mutation is direct enough, and any apparent retrogradations are optical delusions due to your standpoint. So he is even like telling the master, like, I mean, you are like, you are not seeing objectively. Or, if I am having some regression or something, it's not because I am having it, it's because you are not looking properly. I mean, it's your standpoint that is not correct, kind of thing. That's basically what he's telling the master here. And he adds, at any rate, that is an extremely ingenious explanation. He's even referring like that ironical way to like all the reasons that you are giving me, Master KH, is are just ingenious explanations from you to keep me apart from the teachings that I so crave to have and that my intuition wants to have, kind of. And then he ends the letter, yours ever sincerely, A.O. Hume. So this passage offers a window to the inner conflict of a mind, like Hume's mind, caught between the mystical Mahatma's teachings and the deep-seated imprint of Western religions and rational thought. Hume is very honest in the letter, and I mean, he really talks in a very bold way. And that suggests his sincere but conflicted spiritual conviction. The statement that he says, I cannot truly say that I believe that that there is no God, is like a telling hesitation. It reflects a consciousness wavering between inherited belief and emerging understanding. And this hesitation can be seen as the very friction that precedes transformation, for instance, one could say. So it's like we can look at it and we can see how the lower manas, the personal mind struggles because it's shaped by dogma, and the higher manas is seeking universal truth. And maybe these lower manas make him think that he is ready, but the master knows better, and he knows that he's not ready. From an esoteric perspective, Hume's reference to being many-sided, we could also, and revolving, we could also see it like something that speaks to the complexity of the soul's evolution. As we know, the soul progress happens not in a straight line, but in spirals, and each revolution touches new dimensions of truth while revisiting early stages from a deeper level. So that one could say that this is something that also is happening as and that this, in this sense, Hume will be like a representation of this humanity that wants really to learn and is in this process of the evolution and the search for something higher. And sometimes, like Annie Besant used to describe in this wonderful book, In the Outer Core, like we are climbing a mountain, and sometimes it seems that we go more back than forward. And when in these apparent retrogradations, but it's part of the path that we have to go, that we have to walk in order to reach a vision of the higher reality, of the divine reality. So, but anyway, the master is clear, and he exactly knows what it is appropriate and what Hume can take and what he cannot take. And he even challenged the tendency that Hume has to justify even his spiritual hesitancy by intellectual complexity. So Hume, since he is a very intellectual person, he thinks that all is part of his, like I mentioned before, like his intuition is developing, but the master still insists that this is still the intellectual point of view that Hume has. So, and this is a way in which the master shows us that the true spiritual path, though patient and with individual struggle, ultimately demands clarity, that clarity that only comes from the real intuition, when we connect with our higher nature, with inner consistency and the surrender to this impersonal truth. So this dialogue, because ultimately he's dialogue, Hume is dialoguing with the master, but this is at the same time inner dialogue of Hume, and this is very relevant what we can see in this letter, because um, we may find ourselves in similar orbits, in similar moments of craving or doubt, uh, sometimes pulled by intuition toward the vast, impersonal reality, describing the wisdom tradition, sometimes simply emotionally tethered to personal gods, cultural theologies, or to confronting our uncertainties, questioning ourselves. I guess this, what Hume is expressing in his letter, what he was experienced, is something that may be familiar to us when we study and we go in depth, and our lower mind is always there with its own voice, questioning and putting in doubt. So I think it's really relevant, and it also reminds us that spiritual sincerity is not the same as spiritual clarity. We can be very sincere in our pursuits, but we have to also have this clarity that, as I mentioned, comes only when we really see things from a higher perspective. So theosophy invites us not merely to explore multiple facets of belief, but to pass through them, to go beyond them, beyond the intellectual, to pierce through the veils of personality, culture, emotion, and just stand in the silence where the truth and not the belief speaks. Because it is there in that sacred center that intuition reveals itself, not as a projection of early training, but as the voice of the soul itself. And this reminds me also one of the advices that Anivesa needs to give. I mean, we study maybe a small fragment, but we reflect upon it during 3 times the time that we take to read it. It's not about the amount of information that we gather, like you wants to gather, but it is about the deepness, the intensity that we really give to those very few teachings. When we really meditate upon and we really go in different layers and different levels of what that teaching can give to us, can talk to us. So in that moment is when intuition develops and we can really hear that inner voice. But as mentioned, Hume's inner struggle remains relevant for us. So it's important that we have this in mind all the time. As I always say, I mean, all the importance of this study or any kind of study is how it speaks to us and how we can really bring it to life and to practice as students of theosophy and as work in progress that we are, every human being. So yes, basically that's it. So this was the first letter that was written by Hume to the Master KH. Now we are going to see a part only, not the complete letter of Hume to H.P.B, because it's also like a long letter. And this is LBS 156 from January 1881. And through all this letter, we can find various comments made by Master M in this case. And the previous one, the comments were by Master Kutumi. Now these are by Master Moria, and the letter shows the internal conflict and wavering faith, basically very similar motives of the previous one, and he begins like that. My dear old lady, was the way he called Blavatsky.
And he says, and though I'm desperately inclined at times to believe that you are an impostor, I believe I love you more than any of them. So we can see here a mix, or tone with, there is a mix of affection and doubt. Hume's language is strictly raw, candid, oscillating between sincere admiration for HPB and deep skepticism about her credibility. The opening line, though I am desperately inclined at times to believe that you are an impostor, I believe I love you more than any of them, sets the paradoxical tone that continues throughout the letter. And after this introduction, Hume states the purpose of his letter to HPB that have to do with some pamphlet that he is preparing. He says, I have just got off the last pages of a pamphlet I am preparing. These last pages are an extract from your letter about Madame Thekla Lavendel, but your explanation in this case is not intelligible. So after trying to make out what you meant, I have entirely rewritten this out of my inner consciousness. Buddha knows if I have got on the right scent. I do not. But you will see the proofs, and you or the brothers must correct any blunders. We can see his earnestness and his limitations in grasping the deeper meanings behind the teachings and communications. His remark that he rewrote this out of his inner consciousness underscores a recurrent pattern. When he is unable to intellectually decode esoteric material, Hume defaults to personal intuition, or what he calls intuition, but is more as his intellect, or reconstruction. It highlights the difficulty to transmit occult truths to minds still bound by conventional logic and egoic filters. This points to a deeper lesson that esoteric knowledge cannot be approached merely as content to be rephrased or interpreted subjectively, but by inner preparation, purification, and a willingness to become a clear channel rather than an active interpreter. It's more about surrender. This passage is accompanied by a comment of the master that goes as follows. He says, Mr. Sinnet has to use his influence to forbid such breach of trust. He's asking Sinnet, like, because he's mentioning that he included some part of a letter to Madame Thekla Lavendel. So he's telling Sinnet, please tell Hume not to do this. So he tells her letter to Mr. Hume was a private one. The case may be given fully. The publishing of names of persons whose kills survive and lead to the present day in Russia must be forbidden. So you can talk about the situations, but don't mention names. And this comment highlights the esoteric importance of the personal discretion. He urges Sinnet to use his influence on Hume to prevent the breach of trust in publishing private names that are mentioned in the letter, especially if people are still alive. And this reflects a deeper occult discipline. That is, the true spiritual world demands restraint, silence, and moral responsibility. Then the letter continues. Hume says, this pamphlet, the one that he's preparing, consists of one, a long letter denouncing theosophy as a sham. We can see the doubt that he has, and setting forth all the objections to it and the brothers, put forward by the more intelligent men who do not disbelieve in the fact of spiritualism. And there is a comment by the master that says, such as Mr. Chatelier, for instance. That is his comment. We will go later on this. And second, on which consists the pamphlet, a very much longer letter, alas, an awfully longer letter, picking the first two pieces and turning it inside out. So the structure of the pamphlet that Hume is preparing begins with a sharp critique to theosophy and the master, which reflects the objections of intelligent skeptics, specifically mentioning, the master mentions Mr. Chatterjee, who refers to Mohini Mohan Chatterjee, who was, as we know, a prominent member of the Theosophical Society at the time. That was a Chela initially, but later he became a controversial figure in the Theosophical Society, and he quit Theosophical Society. And this reference illustrates the internal complexities of the early Theosophical movement and the doubts that were there. And the second part of the pamphlet is, as Hume says, an awfully long letter that is, and this is Hume's own detailed rebuttal of those criticisms. So he himself structures the pamphlet in a dialectical way, with a dialectical approach that reveals his own conflicted stance, simultaneously skeptical and invested, while also pointing to the society's struggle to really maintain the credibility amid both external and internal challenges. That was something that the Blavatsky herself and the society had to face a lot at the beginning. We all know the different histories about that. And then Hume continues telling H.P.B., I have indeed done my very best. I think it reads fairly well. It is not conclusive. For that you must thank the brothers. This is clearly an irony. For that you must thank the brothers. And then the master comments, who refused to send their portrait photos to illustrate the forthcoming revised and corrected edition of Hume's Essays of Miracle. So, like, it's not complete. He's saying, like, it's not complete because the master didn't want to send me the photos. So it's not my fault, it's the master's fault, kind of thing. But he continues, but it puts the very best face possible on every awkward fact and gives the fullest view of all the favorable ones. The facts being as they are, I defy anyone to do more. I mean anyone short of a brother. And my hope is that if there are brothers, some of them may, when the proofs are before you, favor us with some hints by which I may straighten the case. I have taken this opportunity to let in a lot of light upon the principles of esoteric theosophy and on matters connected with the brothers and their modus operandi, etc. There is a great deal in this letter. Then Master comments, so there is, but great intellectuality does not always go hand in hand with great discernment of right and wrong. So this passage highlights the tension between intellectual effort and spiritual depth. Hume is proud of his defense of the theosophy in his essays on miracles. And he jokes about the brothers, as I mentioned, not sending the photos. And Master Moya replies with great clarity. He says, the work of the adepts is not about satisfying public curiosity, but guiding inner transformation. And when Hume says that he tried to explain his esoteric theosophy clearly, Master M acknowledged the effort, but reminds him that intellectual brilliance doesn't guarantee moral insight. The takeaway is clear that true spiritual progress demands more than sharp thinking. It calls for humility, ethical awareness, and the ability to learn and grasp beyond words. Then Hume continues. But though I think I have made out a good case, though I may convince others, I have almost unconvinced myself. So his doubt is such that even trying to defend theosophy, he almost unconvinced himself. And Master says, quite so. There are natures also so much psychologized with their own eloquence, so completely subjugated by their own great oratorial powers that they are the first to fall under the charm. Mr. Hume will as easily bamboozle himself into as out of any belief, provided he is allowed to take all the points himself. Never till I came to defend it did I realize the extreme weakness. I'm sorry, this is a part of, there is a mistake, but this Last part is from Hume. Never till I came to defend it, I realized the extreme weakness of our position. So this passage reveals Hume's deeper inner struggle. He publicly defends theosophy, but at the same time doubts it more than ever. His sharp intellect, once that is his strength, also becomes a source of confusion. He basically can argue for or against anything, including his own beliefs. And Master Moria notes this tendency, warning that brilliance without discernment can mislead. His doubts intensify as he critiques not just the teachings, but also H.P.B. herself, admiring her yet frustrated by what he sees as her erratic temperament, which he believes weakens the movement's credibility. So this is the next thing. But I mean, he critiques the movement, but he's also in this duality about H.P.B. herself. And he says to her, you dear old sinner, and wouldn't you have been a reprobate under normal conditions, are the worst breach of all. Your entire want of control of temper, your utterly un-Buddha and Christ-like manner of speaking of all who offend you, your reckless statements from together and indictment that it is hard to meet. I think, got grounded. This is the way Hume refers to Blavatsky. And again, Master's comment is, yes, but at what price? So Hume refers to her as the worst breach of all. He laments that her behavior gives critics ample ammunition. Her utterly un-Buddha and Christ-like manner of speaking of all, kind of. Master M's note this comment, yes, but at what a price? He acknowledged that the toll of H.P.B. herself on her health, strength, her well-being in general has been immense. And that is the reason. And Master puts it like that. That is the price that she's paying for that. And Hume is just criticizing it. So he continues, but though I may stop others' mouths, I personally am not satisfied. Now perhaps you will say, are you any better? I shall reply at once, certainly not, probably in other ways 10 times worse. But then I am not the chosen messenger of the embodiment of all purity and virtue. I am a mud-stained soul that to a cat may look a king, may not even look at a brother. So the comment of the master to this, oh, sorry, I forgot to change the PowerPoint. The comment to the master of this is as follows, because I mean, he's saying that he can stop others' mouths, but he is not satisfied. But I mean, anyway, he's not the chosen one. It's Blavatsky, the chosen one. So he may not look so good by the brothers, but maybe, I mean, he's not Blavatsky. So he's kind of making himself look like humble. But then the master comments, hypocrisy is not always the necessary burden of villainy, but often the outcome of vain coquetry with one's own nature. The inner Hume assuming attitudes before the mirror of the outer Hume. That is his comment. And then he continues, Hume continues. No, I know all about the brothers. Suppose explanation that you are a psychological cripple, one of your 7 principles being in pawn in Tibet. If so, more shame to them keeping other people's property to the great detriment of the owner. But granted so, then I ask my friends, the brothers, to préciser, as the French say, which principle have you got, all chaps? Préciser means like to be precise, to specify. So the comment of the master comes exactly when I say, now I know all about the brother's supposed explanation. He claims that he knows all about the brother's supposed explanation. And Master M clearly saying he is mistaken. He does not. This passage captures Hume's internal conflict once more, and he confesses that that he is continues insisting that he is unsatisfied. And he contrasts himself with H.P.B., whom he tells to a much higher standard as the messenger of the masters, while casting himself as unworthy even to look at a brother. And Master responds insightfully, noting that is a dramatic humility that is not genuine awareness, but rather a kind of inner vanity. And as for Hume's sarcastic reference to the claim that one of H.P.B.'s principles is in pawn in Tibet, Master corrects him bluntly. He says he is mistaken, he does not know. And this underscores how easily Hume lets skepticism and clever rhetoric obscure the deeper reality that he claims to seek. And I am going to stop here because immediately after this, he will continue with a sarcastic dissection of the 7 principles, questioning all what he claims to know all about. And he will begin to dissect all the 7 principles that are a core concept in the theosophical metaphysics that reflects, and this kind of dissection reflects not only his growing frustration, but his sharp wit. He tears apart the idea that of H.P.B. having one of her principles in pawn in Tibet and uses it as a springboard to satirize the system coherence. But as I told, we will stop here and we will go in depth on this matter the next session because it really requires like a little more of explanation. And since it is a core teaching of philosophy, it's better that we take it with enough time. So yes, let's stop here and thank you. Thank you again for your patience.
Thank you, Victor. So we go to Meenakshi ji for the Hindi translation today, or Sushma ji? Who's giving it today?
Sushma, yes.
Sushma ji, okay.
Yeah.
नमस्कार, थैंक यू सिस्टर कैटेलिना, थैंक यू विमल जी। मैं पत्र संख्या 155 प्रस्तुत कर रही हूँ। यह पत्र सितंबर 1882 में ए ह्यूम के द्वारा केएच को लिखा पत्र है। इसका एक अंश है जो अपेंडिक्स 3 में है। ह्यूम लिखते हैं, मैं न केवल आपके इस अधिकार के प्रयोग को पसंद करता हूँ, बल्कि मैं इसके लिए इच्छुक भी रहता हूँ और वास्तव में मुझे खुशी होगी कि यदि आप हमेशा अपने मन की बात स्वतंत्र रूप से कहें, जैसा कि आप कहते हैं। मैं अभद्र यानी असभ्य व्यवहार पर आपत्ति करता हूँ। कुछ लोग अशिष्ट होते हैं, किंतु मुझे बिना ठेस पहुंचाए। इसमें मुख्य बात यह है कि जो बोल्ड लेटर में लिखा है वो मास्टर केएच की टिप्पणी है, और जो अंडरलाइन किया गया है वो ह्यूम के पत्र के पैसेज में नीचे अंडरलाइन किया गया है, जो इम्पोर्टेंट सेंटेंसेस है। तो पहला पॉइंट है, क्या वह मास्टर एम एवं एचपीबी को लिखे अपने पत्रों को शिष्टाचारपूर्ण कहता है? एक सज्जन व्यक्ति के रूप में वह मेरी भावनाओं के विरुद्ध बोलता है, वैसे ही जैसे कि एक दुर्गंध जो ग्रहण शक्ति की तंत्रिका को नुकसान पहुंचाती है। विद इन इन्वर्टेड कॉमा ह्यूम लिखते हैं, जहां तक आप जिस विशेष बिंदु पर जोर देते हैं, अर्थात मेरी महान परिवर्तनशीलता को, तो मुझे लगता है कि आपके पास हमला करने के लिए प्रत्यक्षतः या प्रथम दृष्टया आधार हैं, लेकिन फिर भी मामला वैसा नहीं है जैसा कि आप सोचते हैं। मैं वास्तव में इतना परिवर्तनशील भी नहीं हूँ। मैं केवल आप पर निर्भर नहीं रह सकता। आपके पास बहुत कम समय है और आप जिस एकमात्र तरीके से यानी पत्र के माध्यम से मुझे पढ़ा सकते हैं, जो बहुत धीमा और असंतोषजनक है, किंतु अब मेरे लिए कहीं और देखना उचित नहीं होगा। दूसरा पॉइंट है, सीसीएम शायद निष्पक्ष या निष्कपट रूप से कहेंगे, परिस्थितियों ने मुझे रोका है। आपने मुझे ऐसे स्थान पर रखा है, मैं निश्चित रूप से कहता हूँ कि आप जो सिखाते हैं उसमें सही थे। बहुत संभव हो कि आप सही हों, लेकिन उच्चतम ज्ञान या शिक्षा के अन्य लोग जो स्पष्ट रूप से आपके जैसे बहुत ही विषयों के ज्ञाता हैं, वो आपके विचारों से बहुत हद तक सहमत है, किंतु फिर भी वो दोषारोपण करते हैं, कहते हैं कि आप गलत रास्ते पे हैं। आप केवल परिष्कृत और उच्च सुसंस्कृत तांत्रिक हैं, जो प्रणव एवं ब्रह्म के ध्यान के बजाय शक्ति या कामरूप की उपासना के लिए प्रयास कर रहे हैं। वे आपके इस विचार से पूरी तरह से असहमत हैं कि कोई ईश्वर नहीं है। तीसरा पॉइंट है, क्या वो वेदांतिन अद्वैत हैं? अब मैं यह कहने का दावा नहीं करता कि आप में से कौन सही है। जहां तक मैं समझ सकता हूं कि उनकी शिक्षा और योग शक्तियां आपकी तुलना में कम नहीं। चौथा पॉइंट, उनके श्रेष्ठ एवं पुराने स्वामी यानी हेड के पास कोई शक्ति नहीं है। इसका तार्किक निष्कर्ष यह होगा कि हमारे पास भी कोई शक्ति नहीं। लेकिन मेरे प्रिय मित्र, मान लीजिए कि यदि आप सही भी हैं, तब भी मुझे यह डर है कि आप जिस दर्शन को सर्वोच्च स्थान देते हैं, वह एक शुष्क, अपरिपक्व नास्तिकता से घिरा हुआ है। आपने अपनी टिप्पणी में इस पर जोर दिया है। विद इन ब्रैकेट, ह्यूम कहते हैं, क्योंकि आप मेरी इस परोक्ष घोषणा को स्वीकार नहीं करेंगे और इस दुखद स्थिति को भी स्वीकार नहीं किया जाएगा। पांचवा पॉइंट है, क्या यह स्पष्ट निष्पक्ष है और क्या हमें ऐसी नीति को स्वीकार करना चाहिए? इस भौतिकवादी युग में यूरोप में यह स्वीकृत नहीं होगा और न ही एशिया में। लेकिन इसके अलावा अगर हम इसको प्रसारित भी करें, तो क्या यह नीति संसार की वर्तमान स्थिति में अच्छाई पैदा करेगी? क्वेश्चन मार्क है। आपके और आपके जैसे पवित्र और चरित्र के उच्च स्तर वाले लोगों के लिए, यहाँ तक कि मेरे जैसे निम्न मानदंड वाले नीचे के लोगों के लिए, शुद्ध नास्तिकता कोई नुकसान नहीं पहुंचा सकती, लेकिन अशिक्षित और आध्यात्मिक रूप से पूरी तरह से सुषुप्त अचेतन वर्ग के लिए बुराई लाएगी। मुझे इस बात का डर है। छठा पॉइंट है, और क्या एक अंधविश्वासी कल्पना, एक शुद्ध मितक जो विश्वास का भाव कभी भी अच्छाई पैदा कर सकता है? हमें उनके द्वारा जेसुइट्स कहा जाता है, फिर भी उसकी नीति पूरी तरह से शुद्ध लायोलियन ही होगी। लेकिन फिर आप जैसा कहेंगे, यह प्रारंभिक सेक्शन का प्रभाव है। मेरी अंतर्दृष्टि मुझे आपके दृष्टिकोण को स्वीकार करने की अनुमति नहीं देती, जो सिद्ध भी हो चुका है। मैं वास्तव में यह नहीं कह सकता, किंतु मैं विश्वास करता हूं कि ईश्वर नहीं है। मैं तो यह विश्वास करता हूं कि ईश्वर है। मैं मास्टर, सातवां पॉइंट है, मैं मास्टर एम या केएस से ज्यादा अद्वैती हूँ। मुझे लगता है कि आप मेरी परिवर्तनशीलता के बारे में जो नजरिया रखते हैं, वह सही नहीं है। मैं बहुआयामी हूँ। जैसे जैसे मैं आगे बढ़ता हूँ और चक्रीय रूप से घूमता हूँ, तो आप अलग अलग समय में मेरा अलग अलग पक्ष देखते हैं। लेकिन आप पाएंगे कि मामूली उत्परिवर्तनों यानी म्यूटेशन को छोड़कर मेरी कक्षा यानी ऑर्बिट काफी सीधी है, और आपके दृष्टिकोण यानी व्यू पॉइंट के कारण कोई भी स्पष्ट अधोगति यानी रेट्रोग्रेशन दृष्टि भ्रम यानी ऑप्टिकल इल्यूजन है, और किसी भी स्तर पर यह एक सरल व्याख्या है। आपका हमेशा ईमानदार एओ ह्यूम। इस पर नीचे टिप्पणी की है मास्टर ने, इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं है कि वो बहुत निष्कपट है। पत्र संख्या 156, जो ए ह्यूम ने एचपीबी को 4 जनवरी 1881 में लिखा था, जिसमें मास्टर एम की टिप्पणियां हैं। ह्यूम लिखते हैं, मेरी प्रिय वृद्ध स्त्री, कभी कभी मैं निराशा के भाव से विश्वास करने के लिए बाध्य हो जाता हूँ कि तुम अविश्वसनीय और धोखेबाज हो। लेकिन मेरा मानना है कि मैं उन सब में से तुम्हें अधिक प्रेम करता हूँ। मैंने अभी अभी एक पत्रक यानी पैम्फलेट के आखिरी पन्ने पढ़े हैं, जिसे मैं तैयार कर रहा हूँ। ये आखिरी पन्ने मैडम थेकला लेबेनहोडॉर्फ के विषय में तुम्हारे पत्र का अंश है, लेकिन इस मामले में तुम्हारी व्याख्या स्पष्ट नहीं। इसलिए यह समझने की कोशिश करने के बाद कि तुम्हारा क्या तात्पर्य था, मैंने अपनी आंतरिक दृष्टि या आंतरिक चेतना से इसे पूर्ण रूप से पुनः लिखा है। बुद्ध जानते हैं, अगर मैंने सही गंध यानी सही एसेंस प्राप्त किया है, मुझे ज्ञात नहीं। तुम इसकी जांच करोगी जब प्रूफ देखोगी। तुम्हें या बंधुओं को किसी भी बड़ी गलती को सुधारना होगा। इसमें एक टिप्पणी है, जैसा कि विकृत स्वभाव वाले लोग होते हैं, वे सुंदरता के विपरीत शारीरिक विकृति से प्रेम करते हैं, वैसे ही कुछ ऐसे लोग भी होते हैं जो दूषित या भ्रष्ट व्यक्तियों की अनैतिक भ्रष्टता में विश्राम पाते हैं। ऐसे लोग कपट को चतुराई समझते हैं। मास्टर कहते हैं, मिस्टर सेनेट को इस तरह के विश्वासघात को रोकने के लिए अपने प्रभाव का इस्तेमाल करना होगा। मिस्टर ह्यूम को लिखा गया एचपीबी का पत्र निजी था, प्राइवेट था। उस मामले को पूरी तरह से बताया जा सकता है। एमबी द्वारा उन लोगों को नामों को प्रकाशित करने पर रोक लगाई जानी चाहिए जिनके रिश्तेदार आज भी जीवित हैं और रूस में रह रहे हैं। इस पत्रक यानी पैम्पलेट में एक लंबा पत्र है जिसमें थियोसॉफी को एक दिखावा बताकर उसकी निंदा की गई है तथा थियोसॉफी एवं बंधुओं यानी सिद्ध संघ के खिलाफ सभी आपत्तियों को अधिक बुद्धिमान लोगों के द्वारा सामने लाया गया है जो अध्यात्मवाद यानी स्पिरिचुअलिज्म के तथ्यों पर अविश्वास नहीं करते। उदाहरण के लिए, जैसा कि मिस्टर चैटर्जी मास्टर ऐसा टिप्पणी करते हैं। दूसरा पॉइंट है, ओह यह पत्र बहुत लंबा है, आवश्यकता से अधिक। पहले पत्र को 2 भागों में विभाजित करके उसे उलट पुलट कर दिया गया है। मैंने इस पत्रक में अपना सर्वश्रेष्ठ प्रयास किया है और सोचता हूँ कि इसे काफी ठीक से पढ़ा है, किंतु यह निर्णयात्मक या अंतिम नहीं है। उसके लिए बंधुओं को धन्यवाद देना चाहिए। यही हम लिखते हैं, पहले यह पत्रक हर अजीबोगरीब तथ्य पर संभावित रूप से अच्छा रूप प्रस्तुत करता है और तथ्य जैसे हैं उनके अनुसार ही सभी तथ्यों को पूर्ण रूप से विवरण प्रस्तुत किया है। मैं किसी को भी इससे अधिक करने की चुनौती देता हूँ और मेरी आशा है कि अगर मेरे बंधु हैं तो उनमें से कुछ के सामने जब सबूत यानी प्रमाण होंगे तो वे कुछ संकेत देकर हमारा पक्ष लेंगे जिससे मैं मामले को अधिक मजबूत कर सकूं। मैंने इस अवसर का प्रयोग गुह्य ब्रह्म विद्या यानी एसोटेरिक थियोसॉफी तथा बंधुओं से संबंधित यानी सिद्ध संघ की कार्यप्रणाली पर प्रकाश डालने के लिए किया है। इस पत्रक में बहुत कुछ है। मैंने इसको एक अच्छा विषय या केस के रूप में तैयार किया है। इस विषय पर यद्यपि दूसरों लोगों को मैं आश्वस्त कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन मैंने स्वयं को आश्वस्त नहीं किया। तीसरा पॉइंट है, जब तक मैं इसका बचाव करने नहीं आया था तब तक मुझे हमारी अत्यधिक कमजोर स्थिति का एहसास नहीं हुआ था। ह्यूम लिखते हैं, तुम प्रिय बूढ़े पापी हो, विद इन ब्रैकेट लिखते हैं, और क्या तुम सामान्य परिस्थितियों में निंदनीय व्यक्ति नहीं होते? सभी में सबसे खराब उल्लंघन करता हो, तुम्हारे स्वभाव पर नियंत्रण न होना, तुम्हारा बिल्कुल भी बुद्ध जैसा न होना और मसीह के समान न होना। जो लोग तुम्हें अपमानित करते हैं उनके बारे में तुम्हारे बोलने का तरीका तथा तुम्हारी लापरवाह या बेपरवाह बातें मिलकर ऐसा अभियोग बनाती हैं जिसका सामना करना मुश्किल है। मुझे लगता है कि मैं इन सब से बच गया। चौथा पॉइंट है, हालांकि मैं दूसरों के मुंह बंद कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन मैं व्यक्तिगत रूप से संतुष्ट नहीं हूँ। अब शायद तुम कहोगे कि क्या तुम बेहतर हो? मैं तुरंत जवाब दूंगा, निश्चित रूप से नहीं। शायद अन्य तरीकों से 10 गुना बदतर हूँ, लेकिन मैं सभी पवित्रता और सद्गुणों के अवतार का संदेशवाहक नहीं चुना गया हूँ। मैं कीचड़ में सनी आत्मा हूँ जो एक बिल्ली राजा को देख सकती है लेकिन अपने बंधु को नहीं देख सकती। पांचवा पॉइंट है, अब मैं बंधुओं के कथित
सुषमा
स्पष्टीकरण के
जी,
बारे में सब कुछ जानता हूँ। जी
सुषमा जी, ये
जी
इन्होंने सिर्फ 3rd पॉइंट तक ही किया है आज। ये बाकी नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में करेंगे। कंप्लीट नहीं किया है इन्होंने।
अच्छा, ओके,
कैटलीना जी
थैंक
ने
यू।
3rd पॉइंट तक ही किया है, 4th नहीं लिया है। जहाँ
अच्छा,
तक
उन्होंने
मुझे समझ आया।
तिब्बती
हाँ,
सिद्धांत के बारे में कहा है वो है आगे इसमें। तिब्बती सिद्धांत
अच्छा
पे
ठीक।
किया है मैंने उन्होंने भेजा था मुझको।
अच्छा सॉरी।
हाँ। अब मैं बंधु यानी सिद्ध संघ के कथित स्पष्टीकरण के बारे में सब कुछ जानता हूँ। तुम एक मनोवैज्ञानिक रूप से अपंग हो। तुम्हारे 7 सिद्धांतों में से एक तिब्बत में बंधक रखा गया है। अगर ऐसा है तो इसके लिए और भी शर्म की बात है। वे दूसरे लोगों की संपत्ति के मालिक को बड़े नुकसान के लिए रखते हैं। ऐसी अनुमति है तो मैं अपने मित्र बंधुओं से पूछता हूँ। और इसके आगे जो व्याख्या है वह अगले सेशन में होगी। यहाँ तक भेजा था उन्होंने।
हाँ ठीक है ठीक है, थैंक यू थैंक यू थैंक यू सो मच सुषमा जी, बहुत सुंदर ट्रांसलेशन था। एंड थैंक यू सो मच कैटलीना, यू वेंट इनटू इट इन डेप्थ एंड डिटेल एंड एनालाइज्ड ह्यूम. I think everyone who wants to seriously understand this whole thing should read letter number 56 before the next session and just see how your blood will boil at the way Hume writes to Blavatsky. So the kind of language he uses, like you said, the tone, it's really horrible. And actually, and the previous thing which he wrote to Kate, I mean, what occurred to me in that is that, you know, after we gain all the knowledge of theosophy, there is a tendency for what now? Like, what am I personally gaining out of it? And that is that acquisitiveness of the lower self, where we want some gain for ourselves, and which is where Hume was. We want some power, something real, tangible thing. That is the greed for that. And which we know theosophy, any training in theosophy is a Raj Yoga type of training where your awareness has to increase. That is the main training of theosophy. It's not the training of acquiring power. So now we'll open up any discussions or additions or questions. Sushma ji, you have translated. You can add something. Catalina, would you like to add anything?
No. I guess whatever I have to say, I said, and what you comment was completely perfect and complemented it very well. Thank you. And thank you to Sister Shilpa for the translation.
Thank you so much. So
Shinde
shall
ji,
we end?
Shinde
Yes,
ji is
Shinde
there.
ji. Welcome, sir. Shinde
Hi.
ji, welcome, sir. Good evening. Yes.
Thank you, Catalina, Vimalji, and Sushmaji. Very nicely you have dealt with the letter. This letter warns us who are treading the spiritual path, especially through the Theosophical Society. They must have living faith in the existence of the perfected one beings, that is the masters. Actually, Hume definitely defending theosophy, he was loving theosophy, but at the same time, he was doubting of many things. And therefore, Master M warns, intellect can mislead if you are not having a living faith or without that kind of wisdom which brings you to the state of living faith. So brilliance needs true insight. Hume admires, but at the same time, he was criticizing H.P.B. In fact, you know what H.S. Alcott writes in the Old Diary Leaves, that is very important to say here. Colonel Alcott writes about the hidden brotherhood, but later, this was when a wonderful psychological change took place in H.P.B., about which I have no right to speak, and that no one has so far suspected, nor even among those who think They have had their maximum intimacy and trust with the perfected beings. I was transferred to the Indian section in charge of another group of masters. For it must be said, there is not, nor has ever been, but one altruistic alliance or brotherhood of these brothers, big brothers of mankind in the whole world. But it is divided into sections according to the needs of the human race in its varying degree of evolution. So this is what H.S. Alcott writes in the World Diary Leaves. He says, wherever you go, there you meet the masters who are in charge of that area. So existence of the Eastern Adept and their powers that gave H.S. Alcott proof of there with multiple phenomenon. Especially he writes by John King, who supposed spirit manifesting himself by medium made me meet four masters. That is what H.S. Alcott writes. He gives the names also, like Master M, a Venetian, and English philosopher missing from the world, but not yet deceased. The first was my first guru, a man of rigorous discipline and many splendor of character. This is what the experience of H.S. Alcott. And he write about the H.P.B., how he had got that power. So doubting H.P.B., doubting masters, that is what a business of our intellect. So intellect can mislead. Without this kind of love and dedication, that is what I think I want to add in this. And this whole letter is directing towards this. Catalina has explained very nicely, Sushma translated all it is. But I added H.S. Alcott's experience about the powers of H.P.B. and his loyalty to the masters as against Hume. Hume was doubting. That is what I want to add, Vimalji. Sorry, I have taken much time.
Okay, sir. No, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think regarding this, what Alcott has written, also H.P.B.'s own letters to her niece can be read about what actually happened to her in 1875, when she started feeling the presence of another person inside her, which was Master M. There is a book called The Memoirs of H.P.B., written by Mary Keff, in which her letters, which were written in Russian, were translated, and it's a autobiographical memoir of H.P.B. that can be read to understand that part of what went on inside Cage. So because before that, in that it will come that before she had not even got a university education. But if you read the Theosophist which she was editing, where highest mathematics, science, geology, all kinds of things were there, very extreme. So she, because Master M was working through her, she was herself learning all these new things. There was a lot of change in her personality from 1875 onwards. So that is the interesting part. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. And thank you, Sister Catalina. And let's all close in the closing prayer of Saint Francis, whom we know as a previous incarnation of Master Kutumi, who gives us very beautiful prayer. It's called the Saint Francis's prayer, and I've just said it once last week. I just want to repeat it a bit once again. It goes like this: Lord, make me an instrument of your love. Where there is hatred, may I sow love. Where there is anger, peace. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is untruth, truth. Instead of being consoled, may I console. Instead of seeking to be understood, may I understand. Instead of seeking to be loved, may I love. In forgiving others, may I be forgiven. In dying to myself, may I be born to be eternal. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.